I wouldn't call it sleep or meditation exactly, but I closed my eyes and I literally had headphones and just shut everything out and just concentrated on that one pinpoint of light, which was all of my rage, disappointment. And I'm like, I'm not going out like this. I'm going to make these feelings purposeful.
I'm going to not let this control me.
Correct.
All right, so let's talk about overcoming difficulty.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about the way you look at the world, and you came up with a few examples of tough things that you've gone through.
Sure.
Let's start. Let's go chronologically.
Okay.
So I think the first one that you brought up to me was life in track.
Yeah. And I mean, I wanted to come up with, these aren't necessarily the toughest things. I almost have to preface this because it's high school track. It's not the end of the world. But at the time, it was important to me.
Okay. So I don't think it's fair. Well, I think it's a trap.
Sure.
To rank suffering objectively.
That's a great point. You're right.
Because, the 13-year-old girl who, broke up with her boyfriend subjectively might be just as devastated as the politician who just got caught.
Right.
Like subjectively, it's catastrophic for that 13-year-old girl. So exactly. I think we're all, that's not to say we don't want to balance out the inequality of the world. I'm not saying anything like that. But, a young high school kid who's dealing with internal struggles in relation to his athletics, let's validate that. Let's honor that.
That's fair point.
Fred Rogers. I love Fred Rogers. Someone asked him once, like, why are you so good with children?
Right.
And he says, because I take serious the inner drama of every child.
That's a great point. I mean, you're right. And it goes back to us being the protagonists in our own stories.
Yeah.
It was important to me at the time. And therefore deserves some empathy and respect.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you say that would be an area of struggle for you, because from the outside looking in, I was always like, Matt is an incredible athlete that's just like with ease faster than everyone.
Right.
I think the most interesting thing, honestly, before we get into it.
Sure.
The most interesting thing about your track career from the outside looking in was the fact that you are white.
And had glasses.
That's right. And
you
did not fit the mold of the fastest athletes that you would compete against.
That's right. Almost every, not your typical dual meets with like neighboring towns, but like every major meet I went to, I was almost inevitably the only guy that sort of looked like me among the sprinters and the hurdlers. Yeah. And usually we played it for laughs. Like I met some good friends there, and like it was usually played for laughs. But the very fact that it was a big joke was kind of funny. You know what I mean? Yeah. In my senior year, I was injured during the state championships my junior year, and didn't get to compete, and it was very frustrating. And I kind of came out senior year with sort of something to prove, and I was very focused and decided I wanted to leave my mark. And I think I was undefeated to that point, and won like the conference championship, whatever. And it was at the Class MM championships. So that's the class championships before the state open. Yeah. And I think I was the favorite. I was running 3 events. I was the favorite in the 2 hurdles events, 110 hurdles and 300 hurdles. And the 110 hurdles comes first. And first you do the preliminaries, and then the top qualifiers go to the finals. Yep. And I'm going into it, and I'm basically like, just don't hit a hurdle. You'll make the finals. Like you don't even have to, not go that hard, but like just get over every hurdle. Like it doesn't have to be perfect.
I mean, it's just like so meta right now.
Right. So
this is so meta.
I know, exactly. The overcoming difficulties conversation, which we're literally talking about hurdles. Yeah. So I get into the blocks. I'm calm, cool, collected. I'm like, the mantra is, okay, just don't go crazy. And it was inexplicable. I flinched. I have no idea why. And they called me for a false start, and I was disqualified right off the bat. So as this realization is sort of sinking in, like I was supposed to win this, and I wasn't even getting a chance to compete.
Well, was it random?
I don't know. I'd never done it before, and I didn't do it after. Like it was one off. I literally wasn't trying to get an advantage.
Was it at all connected to, I was injured my junior year, and I came out with my senior year wanting to leave my mark with something to prove?
I don't know. I mean, I don't remember consciously thinking,
No,
you
no,
got to
no.
get off the line quickly. You know what I mean?
No, I don't mean consciously. I mean,
Right.
just looking back, do you think there was
Maybe.
a part of you that was?
I do remember
put
putting a
extra
lot of pressure
on yourself.
I do remember feeling pressure for the first time in like high school athletics.
Yeah.
Like I was putting pressure on myself because I had ambitions much beyond that class meet. Like the class meet was like grouping similar sized schools in the state, but it wasn't that big a deal. I wanted to win it, and I just wanted to sort of move on to the next stage. So I sort of had a reputation for a bit of a fiery temper, particularly in the competitive nature. Had sort of thrown starting blocks in the past, had broken hurdles before, like typical teenage angsty things. So I, as I'm walking back with my starting blocks, I could sort of see people cringe. And it's the first time I sort of had, I don't want to call it, well, let's just call it how I experienced it, a moment of clarity. And I just put my blocks down. The only thing I said to anybody, I went over to my coach and I said, wake me up 10 minutes before the next event. And I went back, put headphones on, and
So what was the clarity
slept.
that everyone was expecting you to lose your mind?
It was extreme rage. Like I was so angry with myself. I was so disappointed.
But you saw everyone anticipating your behavior?
It all like very quickly honed into like this one little pinpoint of light of like where it became purposeful. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to demonstrate it all. And it's the first time I ever experienced that. It was like I'd had this adversity and it just literally went to, like it all came down to this point, and I was the most focused I'd ever been.
Very stoic of you.
Right. So I literally went back. I wouldn't call it sleep or meditation exactly, but I closed my eyes and I literally had headphones and just shut everything out and just concentrated on that one pinpoint of light, which was all of my rage, disappointment. And I'm like, I'm not going out like this. I'm going to make these feelings purposeful.
I'm going to not let this control me.
Correct. So then I remember my coach, he was young. I mean, he'd taken over for the head coach who'd had a heart attack. Like he was a young guy and didn't really know what he was doing, but a nice enough guy. And he like taps me on my shoulder. He's like, you got to go. So I warm up and I felt that purpose, that clarity. And I ended up setting the record for the class double M's at that meet. And then I went on the next week and won the state open. And then I went down to nationals and I sort of carried that sort of focus. But the outcome is less important than the experience of wanting to sort of be in a rage and throw things and curse and sort of embody my anger and disappointment, and it all coming down to that little point of light.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the word light as an analogy here. I mean, this aligns perfectly with what you're saying about the value of a stoic kind of attitude. And I think what we're talking about is virtue building.
Yeah, I mean,
not, being in, you talked about the Greek philosophers, and we think about Aristotle and one's relation to the emotional life.
Right.
And the analogy is a rider and a horse. And you have to respect the horse.
Right.
You want to take care of the horse. You want to respect your emotional life. You need your emotions. You need the horse to get you where you want to go.
Right.
But it can't be unbridled. They can't be unbridled, or the horse will jump off a cliff.
Yeah.
So it's to respect the emotions, but use them, and as you said, like harness them to a certain point. Pinpoint of light, though, is interesting because light to me connotes like a positive sort of overlay to the experience.
Right.
Like
I'm describing these negative feelings.
Well, negative, right. But but you almost like you reframe them in your mind as powerful, positive motivation.
I think that's what it was. Is that, and I guess the way I conceptualized it was like this rage was like this sort of fiery.
Yeah. What was your relationship to your rage before that? Like you were
frequent?
No. But I mean, how did parts of you feel about the other parts that would rage? Like, were you did you embrace the rage? Were you resistant to the rage? Were you trying to control the rage? Like,
yeah, I mean, I'd go through where I think I'd overreact to things and I'd be disappointed in myself for like doing things or acting in a way that I thought wasn't consistent with my character or what I thought my character should be. And so I'd go through this process of like overreaction, not properly sort of processing what I was going through.
And when did that start for you? Like, when's the first time you remember like rage?
I mean, I remember even as a kid, like being frustrated when I couldn't control things, and like when things were out of my control, but also
The authority thing.
Authority, but even just like controlling circumstances and interactions with others. Like if I didn't understand where somebody was coming from, my frustration, I think, wasn't always properly processed, and it would manifest itself in different ways.
Like
Sometimes
you wouldn't put word, like you didn't have a way to put words to your anger.
I think that's part of it. Or if I did put words into it, it wouldn't be in measured
Hurtful
terms.
words.
Yeah, it would be words that didn't particularly help the situation. so I mean, you go back to emotions. Like I don't want to be a denier of emotions, and it would be great if I could be like, hey, I'm not pleased with the situation. I'd love to dial up a 5 on the anger scale right now and like ride that out.
Yeah.
But it's not that easy.
No.
You know, it's like you kind of, it occurs and then you sort of deal with it. And it's sort of like, how do you ride this wave? And how do you...
Yes.
And that's why it was so clarifying in that moment, because it's the first time I sort of harnessed it and was like, I can make this purposeful because I have a goal. It's a very easy goal to define. And I have a circumstance.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like all I had to think about was the next race.
Right. It's a controlled framework.
Exactly.
Small.
And once it was within those parameters, it's like, okay, I am super angry at this. Not my whole life. I'm super angry at this particular thing that has happened at this track meet.
Yes.
I have another very specific event.
Yeah.
Like all I have to do is get from A to B. And
I have to complete this task.
Yeah, that's it.
And we as men love that.
It's so much easier. It's so much easier
than relationships.
100%.
Yeah.
Because even defining the parameters of what is a relationship becomes so much more difficult. And it's like...
Let's put a pin in that.
Right.
I think we can probably get that as the conversation moves on.